Hi, my name is Boyd Edwards, and in this video I'm going to show how my son Reynold and I set up our Seestar on an equatorial mount. And a special shout out to Kai Young, who pioneered this and who answered a bunch of our questions about how to do this. To do it, you're going to need an equatorial wedge, and we used this Skywatcher wedge that costs about $65 on Amazon, and I'll put a link to that. You'll also need two Celestron star pointer red dot finder scopes. One of them is already mounted here, and the other one we're going to mount in this video. These two finder scopes, one of them will point in the direction that the telescope is actually pointing, the lens of the telescope pointing out in the sky. That's this one. And then the other one is going to be mounted here and show where pointed directly toward the North Star, and that will allow for the equatorial alignment. Why would someone bother equatorially aligning their Seestar? The answer is in these two images. This first image is of the Triangulum galaxy, M33, and is, I think, a spectacular image taken by the Seestar on our equatorial mount. And the other is of the Pac-Man Nebula. And on this image, there are PixInsight, which we use to process the image, found 4,000 stars, some of them as small as a single pixel. So does the equatorial mount work well? Yes, it does. Is it that hard to set up or expensive? No, it's not. And the thing that equatorial mounting does is it avoids field rotation. So Cassiopeia is the W in the sky, but sometimes it's a W and other times it's an M when it's over the top of the North Star. That's field rotation. And on a regular alt-az mount like this, you're going to get that W as you take different frames, 10-second or 20-second or 30-second frames. As you take those frames of the object, yes, the stacking software will line those stars up, that's fine, but each field of view of successive images is not the same, and you get wedges that are missing from the frame, and it makes processing a lot harder. So it's just a lot easier with an equatorial mount. So the first step is is contained in this box. This is the Celestron Star Pointer Red Dot Finder Scope. I'll post a link to this below. Okay, it looks like this. This little piece comes out, so it allows the battery to make contact. And then this turns it on or off. If it's on, and you look through it this way, you can see a red dot that's focused at infinity. It shows exactly where this is pointing. So this one comes off, and we're going to use this mount to mount this to the telescope. We use this 3M Scotch mounting tape. It's pretty thick stuff, double thickness of it, to mount this to the telescope. So this is a reflex sight that's mounted to the movable viewing arm of the telescope. And I've used that same mount that I showed to you before. And the purpose of this reflex sight is to point in exactly the same direction that the telescope is pointing. So the way that we did this is we mounted, right here you can see a little sliver of a line along here. It's kind of an indentation. Let's see if we can get the light to show that. Right along here. We mounted this side of the base in line with that line, about halfway between here and there. And then we screwed the reflex sight down with those same two screws that I loosened before. And so what we're going to do now is to take this outside and show how we aligned this reflex sight with a distant object that I could see with my eye in the distance, and then got the red dot of this scope aligned with that point. I've connected my phone to the Seestar, and what I'm going to do is to go to scenery mode, and then there's a little round white circle. You have to tap on that to activate the joystick to point the telescope. So you push your finger down on that spot, and then you move it in the direction you want the telescope to move. And it's moving slow. I think I want to move fast. Okay, just looking around horizontally. Now I'm going to raise up the telescope. And I'm following the motion of that telescope as it comes up to roughly horizontal. And then see what we're pointed at. Okay, we've got some woods over there. And then what I'm going to do is turn on this reflex sight. So this little knob here turns it on, and maybe with the camera you can see that red dot if you look straight down that direction. So I want to point that red dot at that white light over there between the trees. Okay, no slow mo. Okay, a little bit. Okay, that's pretty close to centered in the field of view. Then what I'm going to do is to use this adjustment screw here and this adjustment screw here to make sure that that red dot is pointed at the Aggie A. And so this one turns out to be the vertical adjustment. You can adjust the brightness where this wheel sits. You can adjust the brightness of the red dot so it doesn't overwhelm what you're looking at. Okay, I want to go a little bit to the side. Okay, so now I've got that red dot lined up with the Aggie A, and that is the, just turn it up a little bit so you can see. That's a procedure for lining up this reflex sight with the direction that the telescope is pointing. Okay, we're back inside. The next step is we're going to take the Seestar off of this tripod. And set it here. So what we're going to do is an equatorial mount. This surface is going to be in the plane of the equator. And then this is going to point perpendicular to that surface toward the North Star. And so what we want to do is mount this reflex sight so it's pointing, so when I look through it in this direction, it'll be pointing at the North Star, so I can polar align this. But to mount this to this, I need to put this on here. There's a little subtlety here, though, that you'll see right here, the screws that we use to mount this reflex sight, which points where the telescope is pointing, the screws are, the heads of the screws are on the inside, and the same thing here, we're going to have the heads of the screws also on the inside. So I'm not going to be able to mount this on here or take this one off. So to resolve this problem, I'm going to take these screws out Basically means I'm going to have to realign this, but use the same procedure as before. Okay, so then what we want to do is turn these around like that so that the screw heads are on the side we want them to be on. Okay. Should have done this with that in place, but think about that at the right time. So now, I'll get this one remounted. With the screw heads on the outside. So you'll want to do this first and then get it aligned. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Okay, so now this one, when it's mounted, the screws will be on the right side, on the outside. So the next step is going to be to mount this to this surface. I guess we can just put those, both of those right side by side. Maybe that will look better right about there. I've cut a couple of pieces of tape. This is this thick double-sided mounting tape. But before I put them on here, I'd like to get a good connection. And we're going to do that with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. Then I'm going to clean both surfaces with. So then I'm going to mount these two pieces of tape to this base, one piece of tape onto the other, and stick the base in place here. Then take the sticker off this side. Mount the other one right on top of it. And pull the sticker off. Then I'm going to line this up with that groove here, a little offset from this one so they'll be pretty close to the same place. Okay, that's on there. And finally, put the reflex sight on here and screw it down. A little bit of wobble on that tape. And make sure these guys are screwed down tight. Okay, so the next step is that we need to point this reflex sight perpendicular to the plane of the Seestar. So what I've done in order to do that is I've taken a piece of wood here and used shims and this level bubble to make sure that this is level. So I got a level surface. I've got the Seestar base. This is the part of the base that turns, and then these are feet that stick out the same distance that this does. And so this rests comfortably on that surface. So what I'm going to do is to set this Seestar on the edge of this surface, and then I want to take a plumb bob, attach it to the ceiling, make it come straight down to here, mark a spot on the ceiling that is directly up above this, and then I'm going to look through here and fine-tune this so that it points to the direction of that mark on the ceiling. So this is our redneck plumb bob. It's a string connected to an eye bolt, and the string is taped to the ceiling. And what I've done is right where the string meets the ceiling, you might not be able to see, but we've marked with a pencil where that string meets the ceiling. And then what we're doing is this is going to be our polar alignment reflex sight. We're centering this string as if it's going straight down into the middle of this lens. So basically, we hung the string and then we moved the Seestar around until the string is pointing straight into the lens of that reflex sight. So now what we'll do is, being careful not to move the Seestar, I am going to remove the string and remember where that mark is on the ceiling and use that to point the reflex sight at that to ensure that the reflex sight is pointing directly perpendicular. Oh, there it is. It's up there. So I'm going to turn the reflex sight on. And then sight through the reflex sight. We've got the this reflex sight pointing perpendicular to this plane. This plane, when this reflex sight is pointing to the North Star, then this plane will be parallel, the plane of the base of the Seestar will be parallel to the Earth's equatorial plane, and that'll eliminate field rotation. Having aligned both of our reflex sights, now what we're going to do is mount the Seestar to a regular out as tripod. You can use the Seestar tripod if you want, but there are two disadvantages of that. First of all, the Seestar is going to be mounted at an angle like this, and there's a danger that even if you adjust the legs on the tripod, that the Seestar is going to overbalance or wind is going to kick it over and you're going to damage your Seestar. The other disadvantage is that the Seestar tripod is low to the ground, and we're going to have to look through this reflex sight to find the North Star. So getting your body down, especially if there's a foot of snow, it just makes it more convenient to have a taller tripod. This tripod is about $80 on Amazon, and I'll put a link to it in the description below. You want one that's reasonably stable, but this isn't too heavy, and this one's giving us some great images. So, but you will need a 3/8" screw here to mount this whole thing together. So the first step is going to be, I'd like to mount this at an angle like that so that these two reflex scopes are on top rather than on the side or the bottom. And the way this is going to mount to this is using this little dovetail base. And this screw right here screws into the base of the Seestar. And then I'm going to tighten this down using my redneck screwdriver. Then this screw right here is an important one. We learned an important lesson the first time that we mounted this. You might be able to see a place where this screw has scored the underside of the Seestar. This gave us trouble in trying to polar align it. What happened is we had this screw, it's kind of a set screw, screwed in to the point where the end of this set screw was contacting the base of the Seestar. Well, that's a problem because this dovetail base is mounted to the part of the Seestar that's disconnected from here. So the Seestar rotates around this big part of the Seestar rotates about that base, and this screw was scribing this big circle. So the bottom line is you want to just make sure that you've unscrewed this enough so that it's not going to be contacting this bottom surface. But this screw is important, so don't take it all the way out. And the reason for its importance I will show you in just a minute. This is a Skywatcher Equatorial mount, and what we're going to, it has a 3/8" female hole in it that fits nicely with the 3/8" screw on the regular tripod. So we're going to screw this wedge on, tighten it down, and now you can see the reason for this set screw. Because when this Seestar goes on, the set screw prevents it from sliding all the way through, and heading out to Timbuktu. Then this screw here is used to tighten it down. Now you might be able to tell here that this screw, the plastic head of this screw is not what shows in the product description, and it's not what you'll see when you first receive it. We've trimmed off maybe half or a quarter of an inch of the outside of this in order for this not to make contact with the base of the Seestar. If you don't do that, then this guy runs into the Seestar and you can't tighten it down. An alternative, and the way that we did that was we took this screw completely out and mounted it to a drill press, spun it, used a grinder to grind off the outside of this, and then a sander to smooth the surface. Alternatively, you can just buy an Allen bolt, and I'll give a link in the description below. You can pick one up at your local hardware store that will work just fine. But we preferred to have one that we can tighten with our fingers rather than have to have an Allen wrench to do it. This scale right here, so there's this lever tightens this vertical placement, and then this screw allows you to adjust. So if it's set to 0, right up here, that would be perfect if you lived at the North Pole, because then this reflex sight would be pointed directly overhead at the North Pole and everything would be super happy. And so at our latitude of 41 degrees, this will be set approximately to 90 degrees minus 41 degrees, which would be 49 degrees, just somewhere around right here. And of course, you don't have to know your latitude. We're going to find essentially find our latitude by adjusting this to point to the North Star. So if you live in the southern hemisphere, all bets are off. There's no star right at the pole, but there are other ways to do it in the southern hemisphere. Anyway, that adjusts the height. This clamps it down. The sideways movement of the Seestar is governed by these two guys right here. So if you move them, if you twist them both in the same direction, you can see that the Seestar is moving to the right. This only gives you about 5 or 10 degrees of adjustment. It doesn't give you the full 360 degrees. But if you start off with both of these pretty much the same amount of metal here as is here, then you'll have enough room to, and then get yourself pretty much lined up with the North Pole, North Star, then you should have enough adjustment to make it work. And so now we're ready to go outside and polar align it.